On this episode of the Athletic Potential Podcast, we are going to be discussing one topic, and that is what our pitchers do to prepare to throw. Welcome to the Athletic Potential Podcast, your place to come and get answers to your athletic development questions. We cover a range of topics, all related to helping you to achieve your athletic goals so that you can experience and enjoy the athletic career that you deserve. I am your host, Dr. Mike Matthews. Hey everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Athletic Potential Podcast. Excited to have you back, and today we're actually going to deviate a little bit from our normal format. We typically talk a case, usually the last patient I treated prior to the recording of the episode, but today we're going to cover a question that I got from one of my clients, and it's one that I feel like this is a question I get very consistently. And I also see one that I think people just miss the boat, specifically the youth athletes. And when I say youth, I'm talking probably 12 and up, not 12 and up, but essentially 14 and younger. That's probably a better way to put it. And this is something that I found that if we can improve this factor of this routine, we seem to deal with a lot less of the nagging injuries that seem to occur. And over the course of a season, we seem to keep athletes healthier as they throw more and go throughout their season. And so we're going to jump right into that. That's what we're going to cover today, is just that single question. I think it'll cover most of the podcast episode. And I definitely would like to go more into detail on the specifics, as I think it pertains to, again, every player in regards to throwers. Now, that being said, this is going to be very specific to baseball players and or softball players, and anyone who's going to be throwing, I think this is relevant too. So even if you're not a baseball or softball player, you most likely, if you listen and go through the same routine, which we're going to cover here in a second, I think you'll find value, and I think you'll find that it will help improve your athletic performance when you're out on the court or the field or any of those things. So, all right, so let's get right into it. So our question comes from John, and John asks, how do you prefer your pitchers get ready to throw? And I rephrase this question and say, how do our pitchers get ready to throw? And it's a great question. And I can tell you, I played baseball, I was a pitcher all the way through college, and it seems like my routine seemed to change every year depending on my coach and also how old I was, and also kind of my level of motivation, as well as I seemed to do different things with less competitive teams or more competitive teams. And I find that if we can standardize this approach, because the way that the youth sports model seems to be going, or is going currently, is that we have players that are playing for multiple teams, and each team does it a little differently. And I've told this to our professional guys. I've told this to the collegiate players that are in here working with us, and I definitely have talked to the high school players that work with us as well. I said, look, you need to develop a routine that works for you. And if you can do that, no matter where you go, who you're playing for, what situation you're in, it'll help basically get you ready to throw or to pitch, regardless of the situation. And that's kind of the point, is that the routine needs to be built so that it can be reproduced anywhere, anytime, any place that you need it to be. And so, yeah, let's cover through the routine. So again, that John asked that question. So I can tell you right now that this is a very systematic approach for us. It's something that I feel like this has been studied. I feel like this has been talked about. I feel like there's a lot of players and strength coaches and rehab specialists that have talked about this, and we've kind of come together. And I say we, meaning just a lot of these experts and people in the field that have seemed to come together. If you look at programs, and I've analyzed a lot of different programs, it seems like it comes down to essentially 6 different aspects. Now, I'll be honest, this is what we use here at Athletic Potential. You could go somewhere else and it could be 10, it could be 3, realistic. But if you look at these different programs from wherever you're at, most of all of them are going to include these things. And these are the things that we found success with. So let's jump right into the first aspect, or the first part of the routine that I feel like all of our players and all pitchers, throwers should go through, and that is some form of soft tissue work. Now, typically in throwers, we're dealing with some soft tissue restrictions or some soft tissue that may be sore. When we say soft tissue, that can mean muscle, ligament, tendon, capsule, those type of things. So what we find is if athletes can spend a little bit of time finding those hot spots, finding those knots, whatever you want to call it, and spend some time on them and work on in making those areas better, it seems to add up in the long run. And that's a common theme you're going to hear throughout this podcast episode. And that is, these things are done not only to prepare someone to throw, but if you accumulate a lot of repetitions over the course of the entire season, you're going to be doing a lot of repetitions, and those repetitions add up and usually add up in ways that will improve athletic performance. So first one, again, soft tissue work. This looks like foam rolling. This looks like lacrosse balling. This looks like Theraguns, or the guns, massage guns that you can use. This looks a lot like massage. This looks, you see a lot of different things with this kind of thing. So, but I typically, I can tell you in here with Athletic Potential, someone's usually using a foam roller and a lacrosse ball. And foam roller, they hit everything really quickly, just to kind of find the hot spots. And then once they find those spots, then they work with the lacrosse ball for a few minutes on that, and then they move on. Now, this is not a 45-minute soft tissue work preparation phase. This is quite literally a 5 to 7 minute, find the stuff that needs the most attention, because again, we're getting ready to throw. Find the stuff that needs the most attention and address it, and then move on. So first part of the routine, soft tissue work, some form of soft tissue work. Now, number 2 is mobility. At this point, we're going to start working on some selective mobility. I like to have all of our guys here that we work with go for the hips first, and I do it for 2 reasons. If we can teach someone to move their hips and get them moving, what we find is not only do we get them moving in the hips, but we also are getting their back and their spine to find neutral and to stay there. Now, that sounds a bit confusing when you think of it this way, or when you say it that way, but let me put it this way. So one of the exercises we use is what we call a quadruped rocking. You're on hands and knees, and all you're trying to do is push your butt back to your heels. It looks like a squat, but obviously you're on your hands and knees. The key with this is that you're getting maximum hip flexion with no lumbar spine or lower back movement at all. And again, you're teaching it 2 things. One, you're teaching the hips to be mobile into hip flexion and out of hip flexion, but in the absence of spinal movement. And I think that's a big deal. We'll also have guys target the adductors, the groin muscles. We'll target the hamstrings. We'll target the ankle dorsiflexors, or ankle dorsiflexion, I should say. We'll target quad. We'll target hip rotators. We'll target thoracic spine rotation. These are kind of some of the common things that we'll have guys target. Maybe a little bit backside posterior cuff or lat mobility work as well, just trying to get things moving. And so that's the second thing we work on. This takes 5 to 7 minutes to get done. So you can see we're upwards of, anywhere from 10 to 14 minutes so far. So first thing, soft tissue. Second thing is mobility. The third thing we want to do, and I recommend all of our athletes do, is to do some form of activation. Activation is a simple way of saying, look, you just did a bunch of soft tissue work. You just mobilized a bunch of stuff. Great. I need you to turn these muscles up. So we need to turn them on, selectively target specific muscle groups that for the individual athlete, we know maybe they don't do a very good job of activating. So we want to turn them on. The mandatories that we have all of our guys do here, all of our players, I should say, are glutes, anterior core, so we're talking obliques and rectus abdominis, and those. So those are the main ones that are mandatory. We have to have those turned on. It seems like if we don't have our athletes try to turn those on prior to getting ready to go start throwing for the next phases, we seem to wish that we had. So activation exercises at that point. That would be the third the third aspect, or the third part of the routine. So we have soft tissue, we have mobility, and we have activation. Now, the fourth is a dynamic warm-up. Now, dynamic warm-up, oh my gosh, I've seen the gamut on this. I've seen guys spend 30 minutes moving around, trying to get loose. I've seen guys basically jog to center field and back, and that's it. So I can tell you this right now. We have a very specific routine that we use here at Athletic Potential, but I can tell you that it definitely becomes very individual per the client, especially when we talk about our pitchers, mainly because they know what they need. And if they don't, then we start them with the general programming and have them work into it. We watch them, we give them some pointers, and they go, you know what, I really like this movement, I'm going to do this too. We say, great, and they go and do it. And the idea behind the dynamic warm-up is that we've got them moving with mobility, we got them activating muscle groups. Now, but we're going to put them all together and teach them to move and sync everything together in very basic patterns. Squat, lunge, hinge, those type of things. Getting it down and up off the ground. That's a dynamic warm-up. We also want to see the heart rate come up and general body temperature also come up at this time. Most of our dynamic warm-ups typically end in some form of running or sprinting and some form of agility work, just to, again, get everything synced up and more at game speeds. So that's dynamic warm-up. Again, from the beginning, soft tissue work, 5 to 7 minutes. We'll cover time here in a minute, but soft tissue, 5 to 7 minutes. Mobility, 5 to 7 minutes. Activation, 5 to 7 minutes. So at the longest right now, we're talking 21 minutes. That's a decent chunk of time. Dynamic warm-up should take anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes. We're now at just about a half hour, okay, at the longest, okay? Now, the next one is where I think a lot of players get, either they do too much or they don't do enough. And I feel like there's a lot lost or gained in this fifth part of the routine. And that is what we call arm specifics and priming rotation. This looks like J-bands. This looks like arm care exercises. That's what this looks like. And I think something needs to be done specifically for our throwers for the posterior cuff. Something needs to be done for the forearm musculature. Something needs to be done for the thoracic or the scapular muscles, the thoracic spine, the obliques, and the abs, but in more of a throwing specific pattern. We teach a very specific routine. It usually involves external rotation, involves some form of a row, it involves scapular retractors and protractors, and it typically involves some sort of oblique rotational exercise, usually in our case it's in the form of a med ball throw or some sort of quick rotation movement. And where I see a lot of guys go wrong with this is they do too much. So they're doing 3 sets of J-bands. They do a ton of rotation work. The idea is you're just getting ready and you really are trying to reserve or keep in reserve your energy for when you actually need to go throw. And so if you're doing 3 sets of J-bands, unless it's on a really cold day and you're just having a hard time getting your body temperature up, which there are other ways to do that, I don't know if that's worth it. I don't see anybody ever do more than 2 sets. Most guys are doing 1 set of all the movements. And when I say all the movements, we're talking maybe 6 at the most. And by the way, this would also include like plyo ball throws, that kind of thing. When I say plyo ball throws, I'm not talking like pivot drills and all that kind of stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like reverse throws, follow through reverse throws. So it looks like you just threw and you throw the ball backwards. You throw the ball backwards into extension. You throw the ball at 90-90, you throw the ball backwards. Just trying to get the cuff muscles to fire up and get a little bit faster. Ball drops and catches, those type of things that would fall underneath this arm specifics and rotation priming, 5th stage. The key here is you do just enough to get everything fired up and feeling like it's ready, but no more, because we don't want to create exhaustion or fatigue at all at this point. You got to go out and throw, and we want to save as much effort and energy as we possibly can for the throwing activity. Okay, so that's the 5th. So that's arm specifics and rotational priming. So it's from the top. Soft tissue work, that's number 1. mobility, number 2, activation, number 3, dynamic warm-up, number 4, and then number 5, arm specifics and rotational priming. That's number 5. And then the last, or the 6th step that we typically employ here at Athletic Potential is what I like to call kinematic priming. You could just say, look, we're getting very specific now. Everything's going to look like the way you throw, but we're not actually quite going to throw. And if we are going to throw, it's going to be throwing, plyo balls just to create the motion of throwing and get everything synced up before you go pick up the 5 ounce or whatever it is ball that you're going to throw and start throwing. And this gets really specific per athlete. I'm a big believer in that the kinematic chain has to start and stop at certain points. I don't like isolation drills, mainly because I don't think they prepare our body for what we want it to do. I had somebody ask me this the other day, I really like it. It feels like it gets my arm in the right place. I said, look, if you're going to do it, that it's essentially under number 5. That's the arm specifics and rotational priming. That's where I would do it. And then I would get into kinematic sequencing, because when you look at throwing, regardless of sport, whatever it is, this is a ground up exercise. You got to generate force from the ground up, and that's what allows you to throw successfully. I don't feel like going to do all these isolation drills and then trying to go out and throw is the way to do this. If you're going to do them in number 5. Number 6, you're starting to sync up the whole body and throwing things. This looks like, step behind med ball throws, but then shifting from med ball throws to plyo throws at submaximal efforts, getting the body ready to throw whatever it is you're doing. And then once you're done with that, you're ready to go. At that point, you're going to go out and you're going to do your what we call normal warm-up, right? That's your catch play, that type of thing. So these are all steps that take place before even we start catch play activities. And then once you're in catch play, there's a whole nother routine, which probably is another podcast, to be honest. But the way you play catch prior to you pitching or you throwing the jab or hitting a volleyball, there's a whole sequence of routine there. The key, again, I think the key concept, just to make it simple, is that you're trying to gradually and progressively get the body ready to perform at the level that you're planning on for that day. And if it's a high intent day, you're planning on throwing very hard that day or very far, I want to see a nice progressive increase in intensity up to the point where you will be participating in that high intensity. So, So 6 things as a review: soft tissue, number 1; mobility, number 2; activation, number 3; dynamic warm-up, number 4; arm specifics and rotational priming, number 5; and then kinematic priming is number 6. If you incorporate those 6 things, I think you'll be very happy with how well you feel like you're prepared to throw or prepared to go out and do compete at the higher level. And I feel like if you do these things consistently over the course of the season, you'll see less drop in your athletic performance. If anything, you may be able to maintain it, maybe even improve it, depending on how you did coming into the season. And these are factors that play into a lot of things. And I could tell you this, and this is anecdotal evidence, is really, maybe there's some research out there, but I don't, if it exists, I haven't seen it or I haven't looked for it. But I can tell you this: when I have players that come in that are injured and they complain of whatever it is, whatever injury, it doesn't matter really, barring something like, hey, I was sprinting around first base. Well, even that's true. That's hamstring injuries. Like, you look at those kind of things, but typically the injuries, when patients come in with injuries, I take a history, ask them about, how it happened. And then I usually then ask them, well, tell me about your off season. Tell me about what is it you do prior to every game to prepare for the game. And I can tell you, again, anecdotal evidence, I can tell you right now, I'd be hard pressed to say that the athletes that become injured are doing very effective, high quality warm-ups. Now, that's not being said. I've got plenty of athletes that do, and it's just the circumstances, they got injured that day because it was cold or other circumstances, or it's just the long-term wear and tear of a season. But I can tell you right now, the guys that are consistent, that are more consistent, we seem to see less injury from those from those clients. And if they are injured, it's something that's smaller and more easily treated, and they get back out to the field faster. So, obviously, I think there's something to be said about a good warm-up or a good preparation prior to you participating in athletic performance. This is known now. This is used across the spectrum in all sports, which is good. And I don't think anybody would probably dispute the fact that a good warm-up or a good routine prior to competition is not effective. I think you can overdo it, but I would definitely say that I think most people would agree that having a good pre-game, pre-practice routine is really instrumental and key to being successful in your particular sport or in athletics in general. So a couple things. I'll go over again just a quick summary towards the end. But one thing I want to address, we talked about who this is for. I can tell you this right now: the 10-year-old teams, I'm not going out there and telling them to do all 6 of these. I'm just not. They're not going to be engaged with it. And maybe if they are, good for them, and maybe it's great to start the habit that young. But I try to keep the game a game and fun, and those type of things. And so I really decrease the length of the warm-up prior to their participation, specifically in like younger sports. 10 through 12 doesn't seem to be as important. I really like my 13-year-olds to start doing this, just because I think habit makes a difference here, and then they start accumulating good repetitions. But 10 through 12, I emphasize it less. I can tell you that I don't really have the 12-year-olds, 10, 11, 12-year-olds do soft tissue work as much. The mobility is, I kind of give them one mobility type routine or exercise to do. Activation usually is in the form of something that looks like dynamic warm-up. It's kind of a hybrid between activation exercises and dynamic warm-up. And then arm specifics, rotation, and kinematic priming for those guys. I basically tell them, like, look, if you're going to go play catch, it's quality catch. Don't go out and just, play sloppy catch play. Like, make it worth it. I think that kind of more covers our kinematic priming and those things. So just know that the younger the clients, the less I emphasize the routine, like making sure it's all of the aspects are done. I still think it's important. I think if they can get into a habit, that'd be great, but keep it short, keep it fun, so to speak. And then as they continue to get older and a little bit more older, and then obviously as they get more competitive in high school, especially college, especially obviously professional, these things need to be done. And I think if you do them, you're going to see greater athletic success than you would if you did not. So brief thing on time. I kind of mentioned that most of our guys are spending around 30 minutes getting this all done. It takes 30 minutes. We've worked with our professional relief pitchers that don't have 30 minutes, right? But they're doing a ton of this stuff before the game, or maybe they're doing it. They know that they're probably not going in the 3rd and the 4th inning, so they may do some of this in the 3rd and the 4th. There's a lot of nuance to that, but the key is that we educate those players on what needs to be done, and then they decide based on their individual needs, their individual roles with their teams, when they're going to do these things. And I can tell you most of them do some form of this. So anyways, I hope that helps. So it's a great question by John, and I hope it helps everybody. Again, quickly, the 6 parts of the routine that really are what we encourage all of our athletes here at Athletic Potential to do, and that is number 1, soft tissue, number 2, mobility, number 3, activation, number 4, dynamic warm-up, number 5, arm specifics and rotation, and number 6, some kinematic priming, and then let's go play. So I hope this helps. I hope this brings a little bit of light and clarity and maybe some structure to some warm-ups. It's something that easily can be implemented with teams. We've done it countless times here, and we've seen some really good success with it. So I hope this helps everybody. I appreciate everybody coming on and listening to the podcast. Please tell your friends and share the podcast. Yeah, I'd love to help out as many people as we possibly can. That's what the podcast is here for. And we appreciate you taking the time. And until next time, thanks. Hey everybody, I just want to say thank you for listening to the Athletic Potential Podcast. If you do have questions for the podcast, please visit the website www.athletic-potential.com/podcast. You'll find a button there to ask your question. Please input your information and your question, and we will answer any and all questions we get. We thank you again for listening. If you do get a chance, please rate and review the podcast. And until next time, thanks.